Is it your choice? Here's why choice feminism is not good enough. Welcome back to Stay At Home Feminist. Your soft girl era starts here along with the fall of the patriarchy. I'm very excited to put that motto to the test today as we dismantle choice feminism, which is sort of this concept that not everything that empowers you is actually empowering. Yes, today we're going to be diving into why simply labeling something your choice doesn't make it feminist, especially when that choice reinforces systems that feminism itself is trying to dismantle. In this episode, we are getting into why feminism needs to be more than just individual empowerment. We'll be talking about the trad wives of it all, TERFs, and why collective liberation should always be the goal. Before we get into it, I wanted to do this topic, and I also simultaneously started reading this book. It's called Grrrl on Grrrl by Sophie Gilbert. Grrrl on Grrrl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. I'm only like 2 chapters in, so I can't tell you really what I think of it yet, but I had decided to do this episode and then was reading this book, and the first chapter was like very in par with some of the concept of this episode, and I was like, oh my gosh, how serendipitous. So I thought I'd include a little excerpt here. This is in the first chapter of the book. If you've read this book, let me know what you think. I'm the type of person who reads like 3 books at a time, and I'll finish like one of the 3 and never finish the third. And unfortunately, it is so hard for me to read non-fiction books. And I really, really want to, because I want to keep learning and growing, but I'm an ADHD dyslexic girl. So if you've read this, convince me to read it, because I wish I had all this information in my head, but sitting down to read it can be hard. Anyways, so here's what I learned from the first chapter that I read. Okay, it's hard to kind of just jump in without giving you guys context, but I'll try my best. It's sort of talking about how the music scene went from like punk girls in late 80s, 90s to like Spice Girls. Okay, so the Riot Grrrl movement and Spice Girls were sharply at odds. Riot Grrrl evolved organically out of art women were making on their own to signal their presence as an engaged political fandom. The Spice Girls were created by a father and son producer team who put an ad in a trade paper announcing auditions. Riot Grrrl was a creative manifestation of third wave feminism. The Spice Girls pioneered and embodied post-feminism and its messaging. Feminism was over, having achieved all it needed to. Women were free to dress and adorn themselves however they wanted. Any individual choice could be empowering if someone declared it to be so. That's choice feminism. Consumerism was the path to self-fulfillment. Okay, and then it goes on to say, she's talking about the Spice Girls version of girl power was constructed in such a way to neutralize feminism, to loudly and deliberately replace it with a more modern alternative, and to make no indication that the alternative was a model for social or political change. Taff interpreted, she's like talking about someone else's book here. Taff interpreted girl power as having 4 distinct tenets: anti-feminism, post-feminism, individual power, and consumer power. The relentless positivity of its content, the idea that women would achieve anything as long as they were willing to present themselves in the right way and hustle, anticipated the girl boss moment of the 2010s and was just as myopic regarding structural inequities in society. There's a lot of good stuff there, but I just kind of wanted to like read that little excerpt from this book before getting into some of these concepts, because I think she just worded it really well, and I think it just really highlights the way, I mean, I'm a millennial woman who loved the Spice Girls. I still love the Spice Girls to this day. And like 2 things can be true, where listening to the Spice Girls may make me feel empowered. And there was a lot of like design around that era of musicians, including Spice Girls, as a reaction to the way that like female punk music was really empowering women to get political. This empowered us to be girly and cute. If you've watched the show before, you know that my tagline is like all about getting into your soft girl era. You know, I do think there is something really powerful about women embracing their softness, embracing their cutesiness, embracing this like feminine side to them, and really like sitting in that. So I'm not saying don't do that. That's just like my little asterisk going into this. What I am saying is like, when it comes to feminism and the way that the patriarchy has essentially co-opted it, choice feminism really puts us in a weird spot of sort of gaslighting ourselves to think that anything could be empowering. And this is no shade to the Spice Girls. This is no shade to millennial women or anything like that. It is just like, let's analyze things. Let's analyze things. And yeah, I guess that's what this episode's about. So let's dive in. I first heard about choice feminism on TikTok. I had never heard this before. And then I also was recommended this book on TikTok. Book Talk. Shout out to my Book Talk girlies, non-gendered girlies, and at 2 different times. And so I feel like it's like really coming up in my life right now. I wonder if it's coming up on your feed because I feel like I never heard about it. And then all of a sudden I'm like seeing it everywhere, even in this book that I didn't realize was really going to go into choice feminism. I mean, she hasn't called it that so far in the book, but you know what I'm saying. So if you have heard of it, great. We're on the same algorithm. If you haven't, what is it? Essentially, choice feminism is a belief that any choice that a woman makes is inherently feminist if she made it freely, like of her own volition. On the surface, that sounds nice. Like no judgment, no shame. You know, women have so much judgment and shame around their choices. It's like, yeah, let her cook. Like let her do what she wants to do. But where it gets tricky is that like just because something may feel empowering doesn't mean it challenges a system that is disempowering all of us all the time. Essentially, not all choices are created equal. Some choices reinforce systems, the patriarchy and white supremacy that hurt us. If the patriarchy is the house, choice feminism is like redecorating a room in the house and calling it empowerment. Like you're still in the house that is the patriarchy. And that I think it's really, really left out in the periphery and it should be more central. And I think that is the part of the point that Sophie Gilbert was making in the excerpt I read, which was like, yeah, like we went from having female artists putting themselves and their politics in the front of their artistry to moving into this like cute pop girl consumerist culture, and essentially didn't see punk girls, like punk and rock girls like left the space after that. I was like 7 when this was happening. I was 6. So I was unaware, but it's interesting to learn about it. And it's interesting to see like, well, who would benefit from that? You know, the truth is a choice isn't inherently feminist just because a woman made it. That is especially true when that choice was shaped by years of social conditioning, internalized misogyny, and or economic survival. Choice feminism kind of grew out of the third wave reaction to second wave feminism. Essentially, the second wave feminism's definition for liberation was like a lot more rigid. It really looked one way. So the third wave feminism was like, no, feminism can be all these ways. It doesn't have to be like Rosie the Riveter, you know, it could be like soft, which I think is really valid. And if you've seen my content before, you know that like I really believe that. So I'm not trying to like knock that down. I'm just saying like multiple things can be true at once. So essentially choice feminism emerged during the third wave in feminism in the 90s and early 2000s, partly in response to the rigidity of previous feminist waves. But the problem with choice feminism is that not all choices exist in a vacuum. Many beliefs are shaped by patriarchy, capitalism, racism, and social conditioning. So when we say like it's her choice, we have to examine, I mean, we don't have to, but we could examine under what conditions are these choices being made. For example, a woman choosing to get her girls done isn't an inherently anti-feminist or an inherently feminist choice. But some people who are calling that a feminist choice can conveniently be overlooking the cultural obsession with youth, thinness, and body image that often forms these sort of desires in the first place. While someone calling it anti-feminist could really be overlooking like the bodily autonomy and the financial like breakthroughs it even took for someone to be able to get that work done in the first place. You know, so I think there's like two sides of this coin. I think also society is like moving on this train. So I'm not saying one choice is like wrong or the other, you know. I'll probably get my girls done one day. I'm not saying I'm against it. And I'm also like, again, like her body, her choice, their body, their choice always. But I am saying it's just like, let's just examine where these choices come from and like neutrally, you know, it doesn't have to be attached with good or bad. I'm not trying to shame anyone. Another example that I think is really relevant for my life is like a woman saying that being a stay-at-home mom, a stay-at-home wife is empowering to her. I think that is absolutely valid, especially when we live in this patriarchy where it seems like no matter what choices a woman makes, there has to be some sort of like something to be given up. So yeah, if that's empowering for you, like go for it, girl. And let's acknowledge how the patriarchy has, for a very long time, limited women's economic independence, usually by framing this sort of domesticity as ultimate feminine virtue. And yes, reclaiming traditionally feminine things can be very powerful. Again, if being a stay-at-home mom is what you want to do, like, I love that for you. I don't want to work and be a mom. If you want to work and be a mom, like, I love that for you. It's not like I think any women should be scrutinized for the choice that they're making. What I do think is that, like, when we make these choices, let's acknowledge the way in which, like, things aren't equitable. Like, if you are a working mom, it is not the same as being a working dad. It's just not the way that the expectations are looked on by society, by like family, by friends, by work. You know, women who are pregnant or have kids are way less likely to get promoted than men who have kids. And those are just the facts. You know, women who have children or are pregnant are way less likely to make the same amount of money as men. It just is that way. So I think, again, it's like these choices aren't made in a vacuum. For me personally, I was like, yeah, I don't want to work a traditional job and be a mom. And I'm in a place where my husband is the breadwinner and I don't have to contribute to the household. But part of that decision was made for me being like, I don't know how this relationship is going to work if we're both expected to like work and contribute to the household financially, but I'm also expected to like be pregnant and give birth. And I think there are just so many household tasks, emotional labor, unpaid labor, those sorts of things that we've talked about before that like so inherently fall on women. And so I'm not saying do or don't stay at home. What I am saying is like, I think if we lived in a different world where, you know, childcare was not this scarce commodity, if we lived in a world where mothers were supported by employers and by society at large, if we lived in a world where men were expected to divide the household labor equally with women, like if we lived in that world, like maybe I would have made different choices. But we don't live in that world and I'm happy with my choice and I'm content with it. But like, let's acknowledge that this choice didn't come in a vacuum. This choice doesn't exist in a vacuum. One of the things I loved about the excerpt I read and kind of why I wanted to start with this is because there's a lot of through lines that I knew I was going to be talking about in this podcast. And one of it is like the capitalism of it all. I mean, capitalism loves a girl who thinks that like buying something is activism. The patriarchy thrives when we mistake personal preference for political progress. Choice feminism tells us that like pole dancing, getting Botox, being a trad wife, or quitting your job to be a stay-at-home wife are all equally feminist, so long as the woman is choosing it herself. But the problem isn't the choice. The problem is the context and how the context of these choices often go unexamined or unquestioned. Like, is it really empowering if the system is only giving you like one of two doors to walk through? Is that really a choice? And I think the consequence of that setup is that choice feminism keeps us focused on individual freedom while this system stays rigged, while the boot stays on our neck. It sort of says like, you do you, while quietly reinforcing inequality. It silences critique by saying, don't judge her choices, even if those choices uphold misogyny, even if those choices uphold white supremacy, even if those choices uphold economic injustice. And it divides us. I think that's the most painful part about it. It divides us because instead of asking, how do we build a better world for all of us? We're stuck asking like, am I a bad feminist for liking X, Y, and Z? Or like, what is the best way that I can survive and thrive in this system that was not meant for me to thrive? When feminism becomes about validating every little choice instead of pushing for systemic change, it shifts the focus from liberation for all women, for all people, for all genders, and everything in between, to comfort for some women. And it makes it hard to call in or call out those choices that can be harmful behaviors. It depoliticizes the movement, is what it's doing. Feminism becomes like a lifestyle brand instead of a political force. If all choices are empowering, then why push for affordable childcare? Why push for equal pay? Why push for reproductive justice? And it really divides women instead of unifying them. As I'm saying this too, I feel like so cringe because I'm like, well, I don't want to be like policing other women. Like, how do we have this conversation about choice feminism and the choices we make and working together as a collective and holding each other accountable and like being a movement without feeling like we're like policing each other? Because that's no good. I don't want the pendulum to swing that way. Like, that's not what we want. That's not what I want to be doing. And I really feel like I'm doing it as I'm talking about this. And I'm like, I don't want to. I think it's important with everything in life to like understand that like the nuance of it all. Okay. Nothing is black and white. You don't have to judge other women to critique the system. It's totally fine to say like, okay, that choice might feel good for her, but let's talk about the system that reinforces these choices. So essentially what I'm trying to say is like, let's not police individuals. Let women live. Let's police the structures, okay? Let's police the indoctrination of it all. Feminism isn't about having like a perfect lifestyle. It isn't about never making mistakes. It is about building collective freedom. Ask yourself, who profits from this choice? Who's excluded by it? And does it push back against power? How does it interact with larger systems of oppression? I think it would be such like a noticeable shift in the culture and the movement of equality and feminism if we all just started to center collective liberation instead of personal empowerment. I really think so many of us, especially in the United States, have lost the plot. Like, you see the way that people talk about free healthcare here, it's really ingrained into society, and it's a much larger issue than just about like women or feminism. You know, I mean, feminism is for everyone, not just women, but it touches every part of society, this individualist nature. I mean, we saw in the pandemic where being asked to wear a mask was like, people thought that was like the worst thing you could ask someone to do. So yeah, collective liberation. Let's start centering that again. Let's keep staying critical of systems and not individuals. Let girls live, let women live, let people live in peace, because feminism is meant to be about the collective and not just the individual. And your choice isn't neutral if it doesn't further that, especially if it is harming others. Wearing a girl boss tee or a insert empowerment slogan here tee that was made in a sweatshop doesn't liberate anyone. It just proves that feminism can be marketed. It proves that feminism is like a brand and not a real thing, not a living real thing like it should be. If that shirt was sewn by a woman earning pennies an hour, probably in abusive conditions, like, it's not feminist. You know, this is what I mean by like, think about how your choices impact the collective. Like, I think that's a good tangible example. It's like, where are you getting the clothes that you're wearing from? It's crazy how much of us don't know that, especially with like the way that fast fashion is killing the planet, the way that women and children are working in sweatshops in horrible conditions. And we're just like, yep, let me buy that Shein. You know what I mean? And it's so many brands. So like, learn about what you're consuming. What you spend your money on in a capitalist society is what you are supporting, whether you know you're supporting it or not. So like, if you could just inform yourself and make informed choices, so much of this conversation wouldn't need to be had. Like, if you're looking like, where do I start with it all? That's a great place to start. And it like sucks being that friend who's always like, well, actually, like, here's this horrible human rights abuse about this thing you love. Or like, actually, here's this horrible way that this thing you love is killing the planet. Like, I'm that friend at parties, and I get how I'm like the bummer. I get it, but I didn't create the system. Like, it's these billionaire rich men that are putting us in these situations. So what are we gonna do? Just keep supporting the billionaires, or do you want to support women? Those are your choices. You only have two choices. Those are them. Make your choice. I don't think it should be like a controversial take to say that if your feminism doesn't include the predominantly women of color making your clothes, making your goods, it's not really feminism. And I'm not saying you have to burn every Zara haul that you've had. It's just worth examining who's profiting from this, who's being exploited, and are these choices you're making upholding or disrupting the patriarchy? But the patriarchy and capitalism are like thick as thieves, okay? And they both love it when we confuse buying power with actual power. And again, like, women weren't always able to like buy their own things and like have their own money. And I do think there's a very important experience in being a woman now where it's like, yeah, like, I made this money on my own and I can spend it how I like. And like, I don't need a man. And like, that is important. And I don't want to not include that in this part of the conversation. And also, capitalism is the root of all evil. It wants us to believe that owning like a $200 face serum or getting Botox is like feminist as long as you're doing it for you and like not for men. And listen, this is coming from a woman who is Botox. Look at these eyebrows. Look how much they're not moving. This is me lifting them up with all my might. No movement up there, okay? So I'm not trying to shame personal choices, especially when I'm making these choices. Like, I have hundreds of dollars worth of serum that I put on my face and my neck and my décolletage. I'm in my 30s, you know? And I can't afford it, so I'm gonna do it. So it's not like not doing this inherently makes you more feminist, or doing this makes you inherently less feminist. The point isn't whether you do it or not. Again, the point isn't scrutinizing individual choices women are making. The point is, like, can we start to get real about where those desires are coming from and who is profiting off of them, and like reel it in just a bit. Like, let's be so fucking For real. The beauty industry makes billions off our insecurities while marketing it as like self-care and like being a girl boss for taking care of yourself. They sell us a problem, they sell us a fix for us, and then they tell us we're empowered for doing it. Like, that's not liberation. That's capitalism with a little cutesy lip gloss on. Okay? Don't fall for her. Which leads me to bring the point that I've been trying to make home, which is feminism isn't about what you choose. It's about why you feel like you have to, and whether that choice is challenging the status quo or neatly fitting inside it. And that's what I mean about collective liberation. Like, I'm so happy to be living in a time where women have so much buying power and can get any enhancement they want to their own bodies and like can buy the $200 face serum. Like, go off. Like, I love that for you. Yes, amazing to see women to be able to buy whatever beauty treatment, whatever fashion thing they want. Like, love that. But should we also be like opening our eyes or doing something about the fact that like at the same time women's rights are being rolled back and like there's a woman that can't get reproductive health care because of the zip code she's in? Like, how do we create a conversation, a world or something where like those things can exist equally? Maybe not equally, but like exist in the same space. And I think that's the capitalism all. Is like, it's like distracting us away from what we really need to be paying attention to. Like, feminism isn't about being the exception. It isn't about being the one who's thriving under conditions where women aren't meant to thrive. Although like snaps for whoever is doing that, it really should be more about like changing the rules so that women aren't left behind, so that people aren't left behind. Like, we need to be building a world that's better for everyone, better for single mothers, better for undocumented people, better for queer teens in red states, like everyone. Feminism is about dismantling power structures, not navigating them better than someone else. And I think the part that so many people aren't saying is that when your feminism comes at someone else's expense, when your choice is upholding a system that's harming others, that's not feminism. That's not a feminist thing. That's just privilege. I think one of the reasons it's important to have this conversation is because feminism seemingly has become a lot less about the movement and a lot more about the aesthetic. And it's like getting watered down on some live, laugh, love energy. We don't want that. Feminism without the critique of power is just becoming another aesthetic. Making it marketable and putting it like on a cute tote bag isn't actually gonna help anyone. These days, influencer feminism really loves to push like certain slogans, certain vibes, while ignoring like really serious issues. We see this with fashion influencers all the time, who are these empowered women getting their bag, but also like not acknowledging the labor abuses and the environmental injustice that is inherent and rampant within the fashion industry. It's commodified feminism in action. It's commoditied feminism, marketed, packaged, and ready to sell to privileged women, which totally bypasses and negates the need to build any infrastructures of justice, because you don't need to look at the injustice. You just get to buy your whatever leggings. So like, if your choice is upholding these harmful systems, is it inherently feminist? I'm gonna go ahead and say no. We see people, we'll get into the tradwife of it all later in more depth, but like we see so much of this, like, I choose to be submissive to my husband. I choose not to work. I did choose not to work. So like, again, love whatever choices you're making that are right for you. Even women who are like, I choose not to have kids, which I feel like can be looked at such a feminist thing to do, going against these expectations that women have put on them. And hey, like maybe you did choose to quit work. Maybe you did choose to not have kids, whatever it is on whatever side of the spectrum. Like maybe you did really choose that and like love that for you. Are you really seeing why that choice is appealing in the first place? Are you seeing what would happen if you chose differently? And not to say that anyone shouldn't be making those choices. Again, like I chose not to work, but I am aware of like the avenues that led me to make for that to be the best choice for me. And again, is it really a choice if I had other viable options? Like there is no universal healthcare here. There is no universal childcare. There aren't livable wages. Like the system doesn't provide that. Choice feminism pretends all options are equal. They're not. And again, like I chose not to work because I want to have kids. I don't want to have it all. When I was younger, the opposite. I thought I really want to choose to work and have this like ambitious career. And because of that, I'm not going to have kids because I don't want to have it all. And now it kind of like flipped because life and vibes changed for me. And now I kind of have the opposite choice where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to work a traditional job. I don't have to, you know, I'd rather just spend my time elsewhere. But again, like the problem isn't whether you want to be a working mom or not a mom at all or a stay-at-home mom. Like those aren't the problems. Like whatever choice you make, like I love that for you. The problem is like it is so hard to be a mom. It is so hard to be a working mom. It is so hard to be a female employee without kids. Like all of these choices are very hard. And And that's the thing I want to scrutinize, not the women making these choices. Again, it just feels to me like, not to be so disempowering, but it feels like under the patriarchy, a lot of these choices aren't really choices. They're the best out of a hand you've been dealt. If you try to have it all, you burn out. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you're seen as regressive or not feminist enough. If you're a working mom, you're not around your kids enough. You're not doing enough for your family. If you're child-free, you're cold or selfish or whatever. Like any choice a woman makes, there's this horrible label and scrutiny around it, and it seems like it's really hard to win. So I do think like you gotta make whatever choice suits you and what's best for you, and know that. And let's examine why we're making these choices is all. And like, I guess what I'm trying to say with all of that is that if society celebrates you for choosing to align with the patriarchy, but shames you, excludes you, or economically punishes you for choosing what feels like freedom to you, for choosing something that's right for you, it's hard for me to see that as a real choice. And that's sort of my issue with choice feminism, is that it pretends that every choice is made on equal footing. And I feel like this is where a lot of people have gotten lost in the sauce, is because like being empowered, again, is like a vibe and aesthetic and not always a lived reality. Because real empowerment requires systemic change. But I also think there are so many micro ways to feel empowered, like going on a girls trip, like buying a purse that makes you feel really good. Like I'm not saying not to do those things. What I am saying is like, is there a way that we can make those choices and constantly be combating this repressive system? I think nothing sort of explains the point I'm trying to make than like how empowering Brat Girl Summer was and how disempowering fucking election fall was. Like that turnaround kind of explains everything I need that I'm like trying to say. And if you get me, you get me. It's going to be kind of hard for me to articulate this, but like we all remember how empowered we felt during Brat Girl Summer, and having a woman running for president and the aesthetics of all of that. Brat Girl and Kamala Harris like collided in summer of 2024, and it was like such a moment, and it was so empowering and so much fun. I loved opening up TikTok. I felt like girl power on steroids on top of the world. But I really started to question that empowerment, and if it was surface level or if it was so real that there was this backlash, because I couldn't understand how we went from like that to Trump winning again. And for me, I feel like it's because the solidarity and the real feminism that was in that moment, because that was real and that was there, it wasn't challenging enough. It wasn't confrontational enough to block a platform built on white supremacy and authoritarianism and the erosion of democratic norms. Like it just kind of felt like feminist failure in action. And I know I've heard a lot of people talk about that moment and that movement in terms of how like it was such a failure on how the Democrats were navigating the political landscape. But I think it is also a snapshot of the way that like feminism is not doing enough. Because yes, we should have Brat Girl Summers that and songs and music that make us feel hot and empowered and reclaim words that were used against us, like brat and that guy that told Lord she walked like a bitch when she was 10 years old. Like, yeah, you know, like there was so many iconic moments. And I love Charlie XCX. This is not a dig at her, because I think we should have that. But when that's all feminism has, it doesn't have enough solid roots to fight these oppressive powers that have been wielding power for centuries. And so I'm not saying like don't have Brat Girl Summer, because yeah, I love that. That was so much fun. I went to the Sweat Tour, and doing the Apple dance with like the thousands of fans in the stands at the same time was one of like the highlight moments of my life. Like I just felt like so connected and so happy and so like empowered and liberated and all these things, you know, and I loved that moment in time. And I think looking back at where we are now and how high we were there, I see the ways that it was superficial. And I think partial solutions create change. So I'm not saying like don't listen to empowering women's music and go to concerts and have that collective energy together. Like do that. And also like find ways that we need to really be confronting these oppressive systems and change. Like we need all of it. We need the fluffy, fun feminism. We need the feminism that like lets women be whatever they want, even if that isn't like the feminist rigid structure ideal of like a powerful woman. Like we need that. And we also need women to take a look at what's happening right now, especially in the United States of America, and see the way that our rights are under attack. We're being pushed back to like a place where like I have less rights than my mother did. Like that's insane, you know? And we really need to be confronting that. And I think let's normalize doing both. I'm not trying to say don't do this other way of feminism, but I am saying like wake the up. We got to do both. And I think more than anything, that moment from like Brat Girl Summer to like authoritarian winter shows what we're up against. It shows this fascist bro red pilling culture. It shows how deep misogyny and racism are systemically ingrained in our society, that so many people would have rather voted for a felon than for a woman of color. And I think we've seen the numbers on how white women voted in that election. So WTF, girls, WTF. I think one of the reasons women are voting not in their best interests is because that individualistic sort of mindset. And I think when you look at the history of feminism, you can see how that has popped up a lot. And that's why feminism needs to be intersectional and it needs to be about collective liberation. Because if not, you have like this whack ass fake feminism that really is half a step forward, 800 steps back. Intersectional feminism was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw to describe the overlapping identities that shape experiences of oppression. She coined the term in 1989 to explain how Black women face both racial and gender discrimination, not just one or the other. And it's kind of crazy that before 1989, like people didn't realize that. So when we talk about intersectional feminism, it's important you know that it's not like a buzzword. It's a legal framework that was born out of the fact that like our court systems literally failed to recognize discrimination against Black women as unique from either racism or sexism. Like think about how a Latina immigrant working a minimum wage job, how she experiences the world versus like a white wealthy executive woman. Both are women, but their experiences of power, safety, and autonomy are radically different. And historically, mainstream feminism has really centered white cis female voices, which has ignored how class, race, disability, immigration status, queerness can complicate oppression. For example, the suffragette movement largely excluded Black women. The feminist movement for workplace equality tended to ignore the reality of domestic workers, many of whom are women of color and immigrants. A white woman's experience of the patriarchy is not the same as a Black woman's experience of the patriarchy, and feminism that ignores that isn't feminism, it's erasure. If your feminism isn't for trans women, disabled women, poor women, immigrant women, women of color, then it's not feminism. When feminism centers wealth, whiteness, or corporate success, it just replicates existing power structures. Girl bossing your way to the top of a broken system does not fix the system. I think a great example that we can sort of examine here for this is the right for reproductive justice. Reproductive justice isn't just about abortion access. It's about healthcare for Black mothers. It's about gender affirming care. It's about support for low income families. Black women in the US are 3 times as likely to be unalived from pregnancy related complications. Reproductive justice means addressing those disparities. Reproductive justice also means supporting low-income families. Not just the right not to have kids, but the right to, if you choose to have kids, to raise them in safety and dignity. Like, what is the point of pro-life rhetoric if you're gutting the programs that help families stay alive and stay safe and stay healthy and stay fed? Republicans love to scream about protecting babies until they're actually born. And then all of a sudden, said baby doesn't deserve free lunch, affordable healthcare, a roof over their head. Like, what? I used to work for a nonprofit that did really great work with the child tax credit, and not enough people understand how impactful these tax credits are. When the child tax credit was temporarily expanded in 2021, child poverty in the US dropped by nearly 40%. That's huge, but Republicans let it expire. And now they're pushing tax cuts for billionaires while refusing to bring this life-changing tax credit back. You can't call yourself pro-family and then vote against supporting children and supporting families. And we've seen it with the free school lunch programs that are under attack in several states. Republican lawmakers are literally arguing that school meals create dependency. Their words, not mine. Like, dependency on what? Nutrition? Kids can't learn well if they're hungry. And disproportionately, the families being harmed the most by this are low income or Black or brown. So reproductive justice isn't just about choice. It's about conditions. Can you afford childcare? Most people in the US can't. And there's so many childcare deserts that even if you could, they're incredibly hard to access. Can you keep your lights on? Are you getting paid a livable wage? Can your kids eat at school? Intersectional feminism is so important because if feminism isn't centering collective liberty, we are really focused on this scarcity, individual, like putting yourself against others BS I see like all around me right now. Did you know that disabled women are more likely to face medical abuse, forced sterilization, and poverty, but they're often invisible in feminist discourse? The eugenics movement targeted disabled women for sterilization well into the 1970s, and some states still allow it under guardianship laws. Liberation is only real when it's shared. Otherwise, it's just a more glamorized version of the status quo. We know so many women face all kinds of violence. Misogyny is inherently violent, and it's well documented that trans women specifically face astronomical rates of violence and discrimination, but we see them excluded from feminist spaces. In 2024 alone, over 30 trans women, most of them Black or Latinx, were unalived in the US. And it's so confusing to me how certain women don't understand the shared burden that all women have, cis women and trans women alike, with this violence being perpetrated against us. It should be even more like apparent with the alarming rates that it happens in the trans community. If your feminism draws the line of womanhood based on the sex someone was born with, it's very reactionary and it's very flawed. And just to be clear, like, TERFs are not feminists. If you haven't heard of it before, a TERF is a trans exclusionary radical feminist. There's nothing radical about excluding trans women from your feminism. All it's doing is reinforcing the patriarchy that you are claiming to want to dismantle. A feminism that selectively includes only cisgender women while condemning trans women is not revolutionary. It's revisionist, and it's you fully just standing in your privilege. You can't dismantle oppression by selectively applying liberation. TERFs are trying to gatekeep identity, and they're harming entire communities, all under the guise of feminism. You don't get to call yourself a feminist if your feminism only liberates a selected few. If your version of gender liberation still upholds systems that exclude, punish, and control, you're not challenging oppression, babe. It's a new gatekeeper, okay? Policing who counts as a real woman is not radical. It's not liberation. TERFs use their transphobia to uphold biological essentialism, suggesting that womanhood is tied to anatomy or chromosomes. That's the exact patriarchal structure that has been used to police women's bodies, deny us rights, and determine our value for centuries. Transphobia isn't feminist. We've already seen how the patriarchy tries to reduce women to body parts and reproductive capacity. That's full on display. TERFs echo that same logic, saying that womanhood is defined solely as chromosomes, anatomy, as if our worth lives in our reproductive organs, is not just intellectually lazy, it's actively harmful. TERFs weaponize biology and stamp out identity without understanding the irony that biology has always been used to punish and control women. It's been used to bar us from education, keep us out of the workplace, deny us autonomy over our own bodies. To be clear, trans women are women, full stop, period. And if your feminism does not include the most vulnerable women, like trans women, like disabled women, like poor women, then your feminism is nothing but privilege. I mean, take a look at the bathroom bills. These TERFs love the bathroom bills because God forbid a trans woman is in a woman's restroom. Yes, trans people are going to be disproportionately, and not even disproportionately, intentionally targeted by the bathroom bills. But gender non-conforming women and women of color are also going to be targeted. If you aren't like looking like a straight cisgender woman and your expression or just your physical features vary for that, like they're gonna try and not let you use a bathroom. Like that's crazy. So of course this is harmful for a trans woman and it's abhorrent and it's disgusting, but it's also going to be bad for every woman everywhere. And that's what I mean by like collective liberation. Like harming trans women is harming women because trans women are women and we have a shared experience there, even though not all of the lived experience of trans women and cisgendered women overlap. Like there is a shared experience there, and denying that is so effing stupid and so not helpful. TERF ideology provides political cover to far-right movements. They claim to be like radically progressive, but they're echoed by conservatives who want to ban gender-affirming care, who want to erase queer identities, who want to punish women for exercising bodily autonomy. When TERFs align themselves, intentionally or not, with fascists, anti-LGBTQ policy, they show us exactly who their feminism is for. And spoiler alert, it's not us. If feminism cannot encompass the most vulnerable members of our communities, it's not a liberated movement. And I fear in a lot of ways that's where we've lost the plot. And we've seen a lot of people take that and go to a different time. Yeah, I'm talking about trad wives and their fantasy of empowered submission. Traditional wives, aka trad wives, are all over TikTok these days, baking sourdough bread in their prairie dresses, milking cows, talking about how submitting to their husband is feminist because it's their choice. And And listen, if you love homemaking, great. I love that for you. If you like it, I love it, babe. But let's not pretend that stepping back into the 1950s is some way a radical act of liberation, especially when the 1950s were hella oppressive. Unless you were like a wealthy white straight woman married to Don Draper, but like honestly, even then. The problem with the trad wife aesthetic is that it romanticizes a time when women couldn't open a credit card without a man's permission, when marital RAPE wasn't considered a crime, where queer couples were criminalized, and where the American dream was built on redlining, racial exclusion, and unpaid domestic labor. Trad wifery isn't some hot new feminist rebellion. It's the patriarchy, girl. The call's coming from inside the house. When you strip away the aesthetic of it all, what's left is the same old gender hierarchy that says men lead, women follow. Calling it empowerment doesn't change the structure. This is choice feminism's final boss, where oppression is rebranded as self-expression as long as you film it in 4K and slap a soft filter on it. Like, come on. Don't confuse optics with liberation, please. Like, it's not like I'm saying you need to burn your bras to be a feminist or that you need to hate homemaking to be a feminist. Again, like, if you like cooking, like, go off, queen, go cook. But you do need to recognize the political context that built these roles in the first place. Let's be honest, the trad wife narrative is going viral not because it's feminist, but because it flatters the patriarchy. It makes men feel comfortable and convinces women that they're exhausted by modern life and to just opt out. Don't change the system. Just return to your rightful place in the kitchen, right? And what's worse is that these trends are being politically weaponized. Politicians and media and the far right are using this trad wife movement, this trad wife rhetoric, to normalize anti-feminist policies. From defunding children's programs to banning abortion, they point to women who choose to be a homemaker, who choose to stay at home, as proof that women don't need liberation. If they were just a good enough mom or a good enough wife, they wouldn't need healthcare. They wouldn't need free lunch. They're a real woman, they would be married. They wouldn't be a single mom. They wouldn't need that help. Do you see how flawed that is? So I've mentioned it a lot throughout this episode, but let's get into why collective liberation matters. Feminism that's only working for a select few is not feminism. It's just not. And when we talk about choice feminism, we have to ask who actually has choices here and who is left out of this choice. Because feminism shouldn't be measured by how you feel in a curated life. It's like, does the single mom working 3 jobs have childcare, have healthcare? If your empowerment isn't accessible to an undocumented worker, or the trans teens just trying to survive in school, or a disabled woman stuck on a 2-year Medicaid waitlist, then what you're doing might be empowerment for you, but it is not feminism. Not if it leaves others behind. Feminism is not just personal freedom, it is collective freedom. And feminism has always lost the plot when it's catered to the elite. The first wave of feminism excluded Black and Indigenous women. The second wave of feminism told us gender mattered more than race or class or sexuality. And now, in the age of Instagram feminism, we're back to selling empowerment like it's a skincare routine. But collective liberation means fighting for universal childcare so that being a parent isn't punishment. Abolishing ICE because no one should live in fear, just trying to survive and make a better life for their family. Supporting paid leave, abortion access, and trans healthcare, because bodily autonomy is important for everyone's liberation. In conclusion, your choice matters, but so do the systems that shape those choices. And don't confuse your comfort with freedom. Sometimes when you get uncomfortable, that's where like real growth and liberation for everyone can come from. So if you take anything away from this episode, again, like so much to dive into with the multiple waves of feminism and where do we go from here, and this current moment of choice feminism that I'm seeing so much. But when trying to reflect about it all, just think about who profits from your choice, who is excluded by a certain narrative, and what you can do in all of your micro moments of life to support collective liberation. For mothers in Gaza, for undocumented mothers being detained moments after giving birth in Tucson, Arizona, for queer mothers, for anyone and everyone in between, for mothers that need reproductive health care to stay alive for the children that they already have. Like, the list goes on, girl. So find ways to help support that organization. Support organizations that fight for reproductive justice, trans rights, economic equality, immigrant rights, uplift voices that are often silenced by mainstream feminism, and talk to people, call people in about the way that they think their feminism is just about making strong choices. Because I think like we've really lost the plot, girlies, unfortunately, myself included. That's our episode for today. Thank you for sitting in with me and listening with me. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Very curious to how this resonated with you. I think the first time I heard about choice feminism, I was like, oh my God, wait, I need to learn all about it because I might be doing that. Yep. Thanks for joining. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. Love you, my feminist mamacitas. Non-gendered mamacitas. Thank you again for watching the show. I'll see you next week. Bye.